I haven't really scraped the surface on my experience, but I do think that I would never want someone else to feel that way, and I would never want someone else to be making those sort of plans, and I would never want someone else to not be believed. For years, Meghan Markle's claims of royal racism shook the monarchy and divided public opinion. But new leaks suggest something more calculated: secret payments, coached narratives, and a scandal that may have been carefully staged from the start. Was this a cry for help or a scripted campaign for sympathy and power? Let's dive into the scandal and uncover the truth behind the royal family's most explosive chapter. Or asks or encourage someone in their life to really genuinely check in on them and not assume that the appearance is good, so everything's okay. The beginning of the storm, from the day she stood on that palace balcony in 2018, Meghan was celebrated as the fresh face of modern royalty. She was a woman of color breaking barriers in a house built on centuries of tradition. She played the role of the outsider with grace, while headlines painted her as a symbol of change. But now the performance has a rewind button. Behind the image, new evidence hints at a storyline crafted not just by lived experience, but by strategy meetings, bank transfers, and backroom deals. Meghan's story of racial struggle may have been layered with something far less noble: personal ambition dressed in moral urgency. It all starts in spring 2021. Meghan's legal team was already tangled in lawsuits over privacy and defamation. Meanwhile, her public remarks grew bolder, sharper, more systemic in tone. Then something odd began to happen. Aides who'd never previously mentioned racial issues suddenly had stories to share that felt like red flags. Reporters traced these stories back to a surprisingly small circle, a tight group of palace insiders who began dropping sound bites at just the right time. And right behind those stories came the headlines: royal racism exposed, palace prejudice, Philip's comments cause outrage. The clicks followed. So did the sympathy. And then came the money trail. The turning point is the money. Discreet, almost boring on the surface. Consulting fees, charity stipends, speaking reimbursements, but they all land in the accounts of palace staffers just before those same individuals speak to the press. There's Alice, a senior communications officer. Once the palace's most loyal staffer, she suddenly shifts. Now she's talking about overheard slurs and chilling jokes. Her emails show contact with Meghan's team. They outline exactly what she should say in exchange for support and a promise to cover expenses. Her bank account shows the support arrived just in time for her story to make the front page. Then there's Mark, a royal photographer. Friends say he was coached on how to frame his recollections. He wasn't just sharing his truth. He was following prompts, suggested lines, imaginary quotes. In return, he received funds for community outreach, a vague term with no paperwork or follow-up. If you listen closely, some stories don't add up. One aide recalled a hallway confrontation, but palace logs show Meghan wasn't even in the country at the time. Another described a racial comment allegedly whispered by a senior royal, but 4 witnesses present heard nothing. Meanwhile, financial records continued to show suspicious activity. 10 staff members received payments that didn't match any official duties. When one questioned the money, she was told it came from a special grant, but there was no application, no proof of the outreach work it was supposed to fund, just the payment. And soon after, another viral soundbite. By late 2021, the story had gained global momentum. Accusations flew. The monarchy's reputation nosedived, especially among young and diverse audiences. Meghan, now positioned as a media figure, leaned into the spotlight. There were documentaries, interviews, speeches, and brand partnerships. The public loved her for her rawness and resolve. But behind palace walls, the staff grew uneasy. Several aides tried to quietly backpedal. Others went silent, scared of consequences. And then one of them broke ranks. They turned over internal messages, screenshots, emails, strategy files. They revealed planning sessions, talking point charts, and even payment schedules. This wasn't a revolution. It was a campaign, but if that was staged, the damage could be irreversible, not just to the crown, but to any cause that relied on authenticity. When people fake injustice, it makes it harder for real injustice to be taken seriously. The palace, meanwhile, scrambled to do damage control. Public support dropped. Long-standing sponsors paused their partnerships. Even royal traditions were reevaluated. If racism could be faked, what else could be? Meghan's team responded with defiance. They called the accusations a smear campaign. They said any payments were for valid work. She continued to speak out about discrimination, sometimes using nearly identical language to that used by her sources. But questions piled up. If the payments were innocent, why weren't they processed through official palace systems? Why did some staff get them while others didn't? And how come so many of their stories matched in tone, structure, and even specific wording? The whisper that started it all. It began quietly like most royal crises do, not with headlines, but with murmurs in corridors. In early April 2021, a junior aide mentioned that Meghan had seemed unusually tense during a closed-door briefing. She had raised concerns about subtle jabs from unnamed royals. By mid-April, those murmurs solidified into official complaints. Staff described uncomfortable glances, strained conversations over coffee, and awkward comments about Meghan's American background. No names were attached, only observations. These memos, built on implication more than accusation, laid the foundation for something bigger, and within days the British press caught wind of it. On April 23rd, an anonymous source surfaced in the media claiming Meghan had faced cold indifference from the very beginning. The article implied institutional bias online. The outrage was swift. Comment sections declared solidarity. Royal events were suddenly framed as relics of an outdated system. But journalists who had followed royal affairs for years noticed something strange. The phrasing in the leaked article echoed across multiple outlets. The descriptions were too identical to be coincidence. It felt scripted. More curiously, the timing aligned perfectly with Meghan's Netflix deal announcement. Palace documents later revealed a flurry of emails between Meghan's legal team and her communications advisors. They discussed the need to control the narrative. Drafts from the week before the leak included bullet points about microaggressions, exclusion, and jokes about her heritage. Many of those points mirrored the anonymous accusations. By the end of the month, more aides came forward. One claimed Meghan was insulted during a private dinner. Another said someone had mocked her American values. The consistency was eerie. The stories came from different departments, yet they read as if copied from the same sheet. At the same time, the palace quietly brought in cybersecurity teams and private investigators. Their job was to track the source of the leaks and check for any breaches. They didn't have to look far. Logs showed unusual access to personnel files weeks before the first leaks. Investigators suspected someone was assembling a cast of credible-sounding sources. Internal interviews with staff turned up conflicting accounts. Some said their compliments were misinterpreted. Others denied being interviewed at all. One housekeeper was stunned to see her name appear in the press. She told investigators she had never made a statement and wouldn't dream of speaking against any royal. A junior footman was more blunt. He claimed his testimony was fiction, gossip stitched together and reshaped into a complaint. As the story evolved, investigative reporters began stitching timelines together. They matched anonymous testimonies with names, dates, and payments. Some of the accounts they discovered had been compensated directly or through related channels. Some witnesses who had initially appeared to be palace insiders were freelancers or contractors added for credibility. By May 2021, the scandal had gone nuclear. The once polished palace press office was now stuck on damage control, cranking out daily statements, clarifications, and carefully worded rebuttals. Meanwhile, Meghan's team dripped just enough teasers about bigger reveals ahead to keep the media frenzy alive. Behind the gilded walls, the royal household was on edge. Senior staff suspected that the original leak hadn't come from a herd employee, but from a meticulously planned media strategy. IT investigators were brought in to examine server logs and digital entry points. What they found shifted the narrative even further. Multiple remote login-ins from a private research firm known for high-end reputation management. The login happened during the early morning hours of March 28th, just days before the first tabloid expose appeared. Payroll audits uncovered more disturbing patterns. A string of small, seemingly innocuous payments, often under 1000, had been made to palace staff. The entries were labeled vaguely as special project fees. On closer inspection, these payments lined up almost perfectly with the dates that certain employees gave interviews to the press. When asked for clarification, the intermediaries behind the disbursements claimed the money was for professional development, but no one could find any training programs to match. A palace insider said the mood shifted once people realized what was going on. Staff who had spent years believing internal consultants weren't used were suddenly watching their colleagues vanish behind closed doors and reappear with front-page allegations about racism. According to the same source, there was a quiet pressure campaign in place. Those who refused to talk felt they were risking their future at the palace. As journalists began digging into the aides who first came forward, initial portrayals painted them as brave whistleblowers with compelling backstories. Articles praised their loyalty and hardship, but once the money trail became public and I was like, I'm just trying to be pleasant. Like I don't know what to do. I've never dealt with this before. He's like, right, but the UK media are saying you love it. Those glowing profiles were quietly altered. Some were deleted from websites entirely. Others came back with disclaimers about potential conflicts of interest. By December 2021, the backlash had arrived. A major tabloid ran a story with the headline, "Palace Insider Speaks Out." Meghan's victimhood narrative exposed. Several aides featured in earlier interviews had changed their tune. They admitted being coached and paid. Group messages leaked to the press showed them privately regretting their participation. One even called the whole affair a fabricated circus. But the article also admitted that proving or disproving private conversations would always be difficult. Not every claim could be dismissed just because the money trail looked murky. When diplomacy gets messy, as if the domestic drama wasn't enough, the scandal started to ripple internationally. Commonwealth countries that had once invited Meghan and Harry on goodwill tours began pulling back. Gala invitations were rescinded. Photo ops were quietly cancelled. Members of Parliament started questioning whether taxpayers should continue funding royal visits. Even longtime royal patron Daniel Baron-Boy gave a diplomatic but pointed interview, calling the situation a sad spectacle while warning not to dismiss genuine issues of race. As the year turned, Meghan's side continued to tease new revelations, leaked texts, private recordings, unearthed emails. Each hint dangled like bait, but then came an evidence trail that rewrote everything. Long before the drama spilled into public view, an alternate story had started to take shape in emails, spreadsheets, and ledger entries. On March 10th, an account titled "Meghan Consulting transferred £200 to a junior palace communications officer." 2 days later, that same staffer appeared in an article, and they said, "Yes, but there's really nothing we can do because of who you're dating," alleging racially insensitive remarks. That wasn't a one-off. The payment pattern continued anywhere from £1,000 to £2,500, usually in 2 parts, with the second installment following a public allegation. Expense audits turned up more oddities, vague project fees with no paperwork to back them up. By midsummer 2021, those ambiguous entries totaled over £30,000. And that's when digital forensics filled in the blanks. Encrypted messages pulled from the backup servers of a private research firm revealed something damning. Among the trove of discovered documents were draft press releases and onboarding papers for so-called consultants. One memo titled Diversity Strategy described the project as a way to expose gaps in palace inclusion efforts, noting that first-person stories would have the strongest impact. Another file approved by the palace's legal team included boilerplate testimony prompts and sample phrases that aides could tailor to their own voices. Phrases like feeling unseen at work or hurt by comments about one's background were part of the script. These drafts, never publicly released, matched word-for-word statements published later in national and international media. Investigators also found bank records for a shell foundation disguised as community outreach, funded mainly by Meghan's personal office. This foundation handed out grants to palace employees with payments lining up perfectly with their media appearances. Calendar exports revealed that Meghan's team held at least 4 narrative workshops at Frogmore Cottage in late March. These sessions involved small groups of trusted aides with minutes showing repeated references to story guidelines, quote, vetting and media discretion. Participants were advised to share first-person accounts, but keep details vague enough to avoid tough questions. A handwritten note in the margins read, "Compensate for emotional labor accordingly." After this, staff members stepped into the media spotlight with vivid recollections. Memories that now appeared carefully shaped. One longtime footman privately confessed in a journal, shared with investigators, that he regretted amplifying false allegations. He described nightmares of being trapped in the palace basement, haunted by the faces of those he implicated. Though he never spoke publicly, his story revealed the emotional toll of using personal hardship to push a wider agenda. The palace was shaken by the initial claims, but quickly mounted a careful response. Within hours, senior advisors gathered in the Duch of Lancaster office to study leaked memos and coordinate talking points for public statements. King Charles Roman III, newly crowned and sensitive to issues of race and history, sent a formal letter to palace staff. He expressed concern over reports of improper behavior, affirmed his commitment to diversity, and promised a full review of working conditions. Yet his letter was formal and diplomatic, with no apology or admission of fault. Queen Camilla released a statement emphasizing loyalty to Meghan and palace unity. She subtly shifted blame to unnamed rogue individuals rather than the institution itself. By late 2021, the palace faced a tough decision: keep the report secret or release a redacted summary. In an unexpected move, Buckingham Palace chose transparency, publishing a 12-page executive summary. The report admitted to isolated instances of insensitive behavior, but denied systemic racism. It called for mandatory diversity training and the creation of a new diversity officer role. Critics slammed the summary as a whitewash, while supporters praised the palace's honesty. Whatever the opinion, this document marked a clear turning point, an official statement on how the royal family wanted to control the story and chart a path forward. The media frenzy ignites. Once the story broke, the media pounced like moths on a flame. Tabloid front pages exploded with headlines about royal racism, palace prejudice, and claims of a paid plot involving Meghan. Veteran royal reporters scrambled for comments from former aides. TV news interrupted schedules to debate the scandal, and pundits on breakfast shows picked apart every detail. Questions flew. Was the Queen's silence a sign of complicity? Could the monarchy survive in a world demanding social change? The BBC aired a primetime special with experts from constitutional lawyers to anti-racism activists. CNN sent correspondents to London and Los Angeles, framing the saga as both personal drama and a potential constitutional crisis. In South Africa and India, newspapers drew parallels between the palace's issues and colonial-era power struggles. Even sports broadcasters slipped the scandal into their downtime, discussing its impact on Commonwealth audiences. The tabloids kept the frenzy alive with daily lurid spreads. One ran a banner headline accusing Meghan of plotting to take down the crown. Another published a dramatic photo of palace corridors under a headline about money and lies. On TV, BBC Breakfast speculated about the possibility of the first televised inquiry into palace racism. Sky News debated how the scandal might hurt royal tours in North America, while Good Morning America used graphics to illustrate alleged payment flows. Analytics showed search interest for Meghan-paid staff surged 200% within 2 days of leaked emails. Sentiment analysis found nearly two-thirds of online mentions were negative toward Meghan. Podcasts about royal gossip flipped their schedules to cover every scandal update in real time. Palace watchers, former aides, and pundits shared their takes on multiple platforms. Brand partnerships tied to royal endorsements began to wobble. Corporate lawyers quietly advised clients to drop Meghan-related mentions from marketing until the controversy cooled. Despite nonstop coverage, some people grew weary. After weeks of headlines, a segment of the public called the media circus distracting and excessive. Satirical magazines mocked the obsession, with covers showing Meghan holding a bag of cash. Former royal aides petitioned the press to respect privacy and move on. Yet the story refused to die. Creating false stories to sway public opinion can lead to serious legal trouble. Defamation laws exist to protect people and institutions from lies that damage reputations. In the UK, proving defamation means showing that the statements are both false and harmful. If Meghan's team knowingly paid people to lie, the royals or palace staff could file civil lawsuits for Leal, seeking damages and public retractions. Although proving intent is tough, a paper trail of payments, emails detailing the desired story, and draft scripts matching published quotes could convince courts that the lies were deliberate. For Meghan, whose public image hinges on honesty and advocacy, a scandal like this could destroy credibility. Partners, sponsors, and charities usually cut ties quickly to protect themselves. PR strategists say the best response is fast. Transparent crisis management. Trying to threaten legal action or make defensive statements often backfires by drawing more attention to the problem. The wiser move is to admit mistakes, show real corrective steps, and shift focus back to positive work. Without that, the scandal defines the person, overshadowing everything else. The campaign started with strategy meetings among Meghan's closest advisors held at Frogmore Cottage and supported by a top communications firm. By late February 2021, they had a detailed plan mapping out goals, audiences, key messages, and ways to handle risks. The main goals were to highlight alleged palace racism, boost public support ahead of media deals, and position Meghan as a leading voice on diversity. They also prepared for backlash, including public doubt or legal challenges. With this plan, the team audited palace staff profiles targeting those who were close to Meghan, showed dissatisfaction or ambition, and might be open to money. A confidential list named over 20 aides evaluated by tenure, department, and personal background. After signing on, participants moved into the scripting phase. Drafted scripts were tailored to each person's role, but followed overall themes. For example, a kitchen staff member's script focused on casual remarks about exotic cooking, while a logistics coordinator's script highlighted dismissive comments about American-style event planning. Each script included suggested words, emotional moments, and fallback lines for tough questions. Small group coaching sessions help staff rehearse, stressing the need for authenticity by mixing personal stories with the scripted lines. These rehearsals were recorded, serving as both practice and training for media producers to keep interviews consistent across outlets. To stay under the radar, payments weren't made directly from Meghan's personal accounts. Instead, money flowed through a shell foundation called the Global Outreach Initiative. This group issued grants timed to reach participants 24 to 48 hours before interviews. Receipts described payments with innocent labels like community engagement fee or event coordination stipend to hide their connection to the campaign. Sometimes payments were bundled with real consulting work such as advising on Princess Diana-themed charity events. To add a layer of authenticity, participants were told to say their payments came from those real projects if questioned. As the story spread, advisors used social listening tools to track public reactions in real time. They noted which stories hit home and which were met with skepticism. Based on this feedback, they tweaked scripts and messaging, dropping vague claims about whispers on skin tone and emphasizing more vivid incidents like comments about imported values. This rapid iteration helped the campaign focus on what worked while prepping preemptive responses to counter palace statements or unfavorable news. By late summer 2021, the campaign wound down. Payments and coaching stopped and participants were offered career support, references, or placement in charities. A few received hush money for extended silence agreements. Legal and PR teams stayed on standby, ready to file defamation suits or roll out messaging to refocus attention on Meghan's broader diversity efforts. The fallout split public opinion immediately. Critics called the alleged campaign a betrayal of trust, while supporters defended Meghan's right to expose prejudice, claiming fundraising for diversity was legitimate. Online polls reflected the divide. A major UK tabloid survey showed 62% sided with the palace, 28% with Meghan, and 10% undecided. In the US, the split was closer, with 44% siding with the palace, reflecting cultural differences in attitudes toward royalty and race. Harry and Meghan once symbolized a new chapter for the monarchy, but as time passed, their carefully built image began to fracture. Public sympathy turned to skepticism, and what started as a bold stand for independence slowly unraveled into something far more complex. What really lies beneath the surface of their fairy tale exit, and how much of it was ever truly theirs to begin with? Let us know your thoughts below.